Well, I think many people just assumed that because I had a serious physical disability, that I must have a mental disability as well, that I would somehow be cognitively impaired because I couldn't move my arms and legs. So I needed to really prove to people that I still had a mind, that I could still think, that I could still make decisions on my own, that I could still learn.
Awekenge, this is Mental Metals, hosted by Asego.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Matters. I'm your host, Asego. And before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
Sure.
Yep. So, your journey from a traumatic spinal cord injury to becoming a quadriplegic and then achieving significant milestones in education and law is remarkable. And one thing that I want to just touch on again on in terms of having this happen to you and realize that it happening into college, it could have, I guess I would say that it had immense effect on you, and thinking that you have planned that you want to have this type of life, only to find out that you're gonna injure your level 4 and 5 spinal cord, and it's quite something that I feel like we need to get into that. So, how do you perceive the psychological transformation that accompanies such profound physical adversity, and what internal mechanism did you develop to foster resilience and purpose in the face of overwhelming odds?
Okay, well, as you indicated, I was injured when I was a junior in college at the age of 20. And I broke my neck and damaged my spinal cord between the 4th and 5th cervicals in the neck. So I'm actually considered a C4-5 quadriplegic. And as a result, I have just a little bit of movement in my left arm and virtually none in my right. I could just sort of shrug my shoulder. So I was fortunate that I had a very supportive family that helped me in every way they could, and who encouraged me to do as much with my life as I could. And they basically assured me, without actually saying the exact words, that they would act as my arms and legs to make sure I was still able to do everything I wanted to do. And that gave me the opportunity and the incentive to return to school and get the best education possible. Because I knew, as a result of my physical limitations, I had to make the most of my mental abilities. So I knew I had to go back to school and get the best education possible.
And you something that I actually have seen when it comes to disability is the fact that, in a way, people don't know when to assist. When I say assist in terms of physical, let's say, for example, for someone that is visually impaired, they actually, when they come to assistance, it's quite hard, because some of the people think that people who have disabilities need to, what I would say, that need to be treated special. And how did you feel when your family said that there will be your arms and legs?
Yeah, I really appreciated that. I knew that I needed a lot of physical help, and the fact that people were so willing to provide it provided me with a lot of comfort, knowing that I would have the opportunity to do more things. And as a result, it gave me the added confidence to know that I could go back to school and try and still lead a rewarding, a useful and productive life. And I was really fortunate to have that support. And you indicated that sometimes people are not sure whether it's appropriate to offer help for people with disabilities or how to do it. I always welcome that assistance. If it was intrusive or if I didn't need it, I would say so. But I appreciated the fact that a lot of people were so willing to offer it and to assist when I did need it.
Think about that, and in terms of it's transitioning, you mentioned going back to school, transitioning to that and being able to have using a wheelchair is quite a difficult thing and to process in terms of going back in an environment that involves in terms of that setting rather than being at home. It's quite when it comes to institutions, I feel like colleges, universities, big companies, and even small companies, in terms of businesses, in terms of moving around and that accessibility, it's quite hard because even the conversation around accessibility, it's a conversation that people are starting to grasp. So would you say that you had any problems in terms of navigating in college?
I had a tremendous amount of problems navigating in college. I got hurt in 1970. So when I went back to school in the fall of 1971, this was 20 years before the Americans with Disabilities Act took effect, which helped mandate that more public facilities and colleges and universities be made accessible for people with disabilities. So when I decided to return to school, I went back to the school I was attending, Cornell University in upstate New York. That was a very inaccessible place for me to return to school. For one, the campus was on a very hilly terrain, and almost every building had steps in front of it. And there was not one ramp or curb cut on the entire campus. And the people in the school, the administrators, as well as my fellow students, were not used to seeing other individuals in wheelchairs in that setting. It was very unusual. So everybody was not sure exactly how to help and whether to make facilities more accessible if I was the only one that needed special treatment and accommodations. And it took quite a bit of effort from everybody's part to decide the best way to go forward.
And it's quite difficult when it comes to that community in terms of actually trying to educate people in terms of disabilities, in terms of accessibility. As I've said, that on my own opinion and the things that I've seen here in South Africa, it's quite different because accessibility has actually me and my supervisor in terms of when it comes to advocacy, we try by any means to include both students and lecturers and also the staff in overall to be able to push the word of accessibility. And one would even ask themselves, what is accessibility? Because sometimes as much as we can just say these words, assuming that everyone knows these vocabulary, only to find out they are not aware what it is. And even when it comes to, in terms of the language, when it comes to the in terms of disability, and people end up, I would say that in terms of mispronouncing the words or misusing the words, and it's a huge problem. And another thing that I would like to mention, some people are a bit ignorant when it comes to education, when it comes to disabilities, but not only disability, also mental health. So also in terms of in the perspective of mental health, you also mentioned that you really dealt with different in terms of many challenges, and definitely the people that were around you in terms of in college, in terms they weren't used to the what I would say in terms of the situation, in terms of seeing a person that is disabled, in terms of attending a college. I believe that one of the reasons why students not why people not actually people with disability and not pursuing higher education is the fact that they feel like they will be discriminated. That's actually, again, that's my own opinion, my own view. And as going back to the conversation, what type of mental issues did you deal with, and try, how did you go around it, and in terms of finding a positive coping mechanisms?
Well, I think many people just assumed that because I had a serious physical disability, that I must have a mental disability as well, that I would somehow be cognitively impaired because I couldn't move my arms and legs. So I needed to really prove to people that I still had a mind, that I could still think, that I could still make decisions on my own, that I could still learn. And that just because one part of my body had a disability doesn't mean my entire body was disabled. And I think the more people are exposed to people with disabilities, regardless of what type of disability, more people will become accustomed to working with people with disabilities, living around and with people with disabilities, and more comfortable in helping those that need it, and more comfortable in working and living with people who can function very independently and very proficiently in virtually every other way when they just have the opportunity to make accommodations for their disability.
Mm, 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 mm. And speaking about advocacy, and again, another conversation that quite actually everyone is advocating, but are they going to the full length? That actually there's my initial thing of thinking that when people don't, I would say, don't listen when it comes to advocacy. It's a difficult thing to do advocacy, and it really takes a lot from a person. So going back to your actual story in terms of relating with advocacy, at what point did you decide that definitely when you arrived, you also didn't understand in terms of the dynamics around disability and accessibility, and back then things were quite different compared to now because people start dynamics to create that inclusive environment, that accessible environment. So at what point did you start advocating for disability, and also for a follow-up question is that in a way what how did people receive your message around disability?
Well, let me give you two examples that I ran into. Because most of the facilities were not wheelchair accessible, I was actually living in a dorm that had 10 steps in front of it. I had to go up and down those 10 steps every day just to get in and out of my dorm. And I asked the administration if they could at least put in a ramp to my dorm so I wouldn't have to go up and down those steps every day. And the administration's initial reaction was, if we put in a ramp there, we would have to remove 2 bushes. And they were concerned students might protest if they were to remove those bushes. Now, I knew students wouldn't protest if they knew that ramp was put in to help me function better at school and assist me so I wouldn't have to go up and down those steps. But it took a fire drill after months of me being back at school to convince the school that, you know what, that ramp would not just be put in to make it more accessible for me, but it was for a safety factor for others, because in a fire drill, they felt I was slowing up other students who were getting out of the building. And within 2 days after the fire drill, they put in that ramp because it was clear to them that it would be a safety factor. And, once they put in that ramp, not one student complained about removing the two bushes. In fact, many preferred using the ramp to walking up and down the steps. So when things are explained properly to people, I think they're more apt to act on the advocacy, more apt to help people, because they see it helps everybody, not just a few.
Mm, 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 mm. That's a different, I would say that's a different way to look at it in terms of perspective when it comes to that. And I feel like when it comes to actually conversation that we're in, it, we over explain things. And in the midst of all of it, when it comes to our own advocacy, people become so confused of not knowing what to do. And it goes back to that thing of mental health. I feel like the reason why that in mental health is one of the biggest issues where people have conversation around it is the fact that they don't understand what it is in terms of there's a lot of education when it comes to mental health because if, for example, back in high school, I wasn't aware what was mental health. I didn't know what was mental health. But not only mental health, but disability, and we view it in a different eye because we were raised to believe that we shouldn't involve ourselves with children that have a disability, and it really it is a problem the way I'm saying it because we had a roadshow whereas we actually promoting the university in terms of some sort of an open day, but we're a team of I think six or seven, I'm not quite sure. But one thing that I realized is the fact that teachers also are ignorant when it comes to disabilities. And going back to the conversation around those conversations, and teachers or lecturers have this ignorance of thinking that they have no part to play when it comes to this thing. When they have a student that has a disability and they expect people who advocate to actually tell them and offer them this information of self-pleasure, not realizing that there is information out there, enough information out there that can actually help people who have disabilities. So you earn degrees in education and psychology, followed by a Juris Doctor degree, demonstrates an impressive commitment to your intellectual goals. How do you integrate these diverse fields of study in your approach to counseling, legal work, and public speaking? And what philosophical underpinnings guide your multidisciplinary approach to problem solving and advocacy?
Well, I ended up getting a degree both in psychology and education, where I was concentrated on learning how to become a counselor to people who needed added support for difficulties that they were going through. And I felt as a result of that education and that experience that I had in working as a counselor, it helped me deal with whatever issues I ran into concerning working with people, dealing with people who had problems, and everybody has problems to different extents. So having that background in psychology and education, I feel has helped me a great deal in my career in law. It helped me a lot. I was a trial attorney when I was speaking with witnesses, when I was speaking with victims of crimes, as well as when I was dealing with people in law enforcement. It gave me a better understanding of what people are thinking, what difficulties and problems people are experiencing, and try to provide them with better help and guidance and how to deal with them. So I feel that type of background has helped me quite a bit in working in my career in law.
Mm-hmm. In a way of definitely as individuals, we have our own views in terms of when you see someone that has a disability, you start looking at them differently. You and I mentioned that you has public speaking. Would you say that people were listening to you in terms of, and also how do you in your public speaking, how do you influence people to not have that, I would say negative thoughts in terms of, or negative thoughts of their disability, of not accepting their disability, of not embracing it? Because when it comes to disability, it's one of the hardest things to disclose and being able to talk with disability.
You know, we all face challenges in our lives. And I think the best way to help other people adjust to you and the challenges you're facing is for you to first feel more comfortable in dealing with your own challenges. Because you convey a certain impression on people when you're uncomfortable in your own body, talking about what your needs are, what your limitations are, and what your abilities are. And in order to make other people more comfortable in being around you, you need to first deal with your own issues and feel more comfortable and more self-confident. And I believe when you're able to get a job and know that you're appreciated, that you're giving back to society, and that you're now helping others and doing work that's providing benefits for others, that helps increase your own self-esteem and your self-confidence. And it feeds upon itself so that the people that you then deal with see how you act and how you're comfortable with your own issues, your own limitations, as well as your abilities. And it conveys a certain impression that makes others more comfortable.
Definitely that thing of comfortability, and actually drawing that word from what you've said. It's something that sometimes people assume that these conversations are too sensitive, that they make people uncomfortable. And it's something that I saw, and I'm trying by any means to change the narrative of the sense of sensitivity. And so I believe that if something that is very important, something that will actually help people in terms of have different view of something, I don't believe that it's insensitive. It's the fact that people are not used to the conversation. And it's something that I believe as advocates, as people that are talking about the conversation, these types of conversations, our responsibility to, in a way, enlighten people in terms of these kinds of conversation, that there's this thing called disability, and it's something that you should know. Because
most people are good people. And when they ask you a question or approach you, it's usually not out of mean-spiritedness. It's out of either a reason because they want to know more so that they can better interact with you or better interact with others who may have the same type of disability or condition. And I feel that if I could serve as almost like a go-between, where if I could help explain to people what my disability is like and how it limits me and what help might assist me as well as others, it'll in the long run help other people, because then those people that I'm interacting with will then be more comfortable interacting with others that may have a disability similar to mine or any type of disability. So when you talk about advocacy, I think in many ways, it's not just advocating for certain issues or certain changes, but also in being an example and being a way of making people feel more comfortable to not just interact with someone with a disability, but just to be more comfortable and more used to being exposed and being around people with disabilities. And I think that's important. You know, now that more and more facilities are accessible, more and more people with disabilities get out in public, and people are more likely to see and interact with people. And same with the workplace. Now that more people with disabilities are working, it makes employers more comfortable in hiring somebody with a disability, because they know somebody with a disability can not only work, but work well, and not just at entry-level positions, but in supervisory positions as well. And it just takes more and more exposure to that I think will help a lot of people in the long run.
Thank you so much for that. Uh, and actually, I think I might engage more on that after I asked this question in terms of you wrote a memoir, which is I Dream of Things That Never Were. So it's actually your story. Storytelling is something that is quite important. I believe that people actually, when they hear someone talking about their stories, it's the same. They have this need of also sharing their story, because, as I've said, in in terms of the dynamics of South Africa, it's something that people are still fighting for disabilities. People are still trying to find means to actually disability to not have that stigma in a way, because there is this thing of actually making fun jokes around in terms of a person's disability. At first, I didn't know that that thing was wrong. And when I was young, I don't lie, I also did it, and I didn't understand it. But as someone that has actually knowledge around it has shown me that it's important to have this conversation. It's important to actually learn about this type of conversation. So, how, in terms of storytelling, how do you approach the process of storytelling as a tool for personal and collective healing? And what psychological insight have you gained about the power of narrative in information, transforming individual and societal perspectives on disability and resilience?
Well, I appreciate that you mentioning my book. I wrote the book, I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken story, which people can purchase on Amazon now, because I thought that would be the best way that I could get my story told to the most amount of people, to the largest group of people, and explain in detail, not just in short conversations, exactly what I went through and what it was like from first a patient's perspective, the way I was treated after my disability by the medical profession, the way I was later treated as a student when I went back to school, later treated as a job applicant when I was looking for a job, and eventually treated as an employee and then as a supervisor. And I thought the best way to explain that would be to put it in writing so that it could get a large audience, that people could read it at their leisure and take time to understand it and appreciate what life is like for somebody that may be differently able than that particular person. And like the fact that people now from all walks of life can sit down, read my story, and try and appreciate what it was like, not just for me, but for others with disabilities, to try and make something of their life, and how other people could help them do that. I tried to make sure it was emphasized in my book how much help and support I received from my family and friends. And I think that's just so important for people to know that they do make a difference in people's lives when they offer their help, right? When they offer their friendship, right? When they spend time with people to get to know them. I think that's so important. And I appreciate the opportunity to be speaking with you today on the podcast so that more people can be exposed to this.
As I've said, that storytelling is quite a very important thing, and it actually influences people to also tell their stories, because, as I've said, and again, in terms of not being ashamed and realizing that it, since this second person has told their story, what's stopping me of telling my own story and being able to actually motivate people to tell back, to also to tell their stories. So in closing, I'm saying actually we almost out of time. In closing, Reflecting on your achievement and obstacles you've overcome, how do you define the concept of human potential in the context of disability? What psychological and philosophical principles do you believe are essential for individuals facing significant physical and mental challenges to unlock their full potential?
Whether you have a disability or don't have a disability, we all have the same needs, desires, wants in life. Sometimes we just need a different way of expressing it or going about it. As for me, I wanted to get the best education possible, and I did that. I wanted to be able to show that I could work, and I did that. But in addition, I wanted to show that I could live a happy family life. And to me, that is the most important part of my life story. I got married to a wonderful, wonderful woman who's actually sitting next to me right now, just off screen. This is my wife, Anna. And together we decided that we wanted to have a family. And we went through in vitro fertilization many years ago and was so pleased that even someone in my condition could father a child. And not only did my wife become pregnant, she became pregnant with triplets. And we now have 3 teenage boys who are doing absolutely incredible, about to start their sophomore year in college. And back when I was injured, very few people gave somebody in my condition even the slightest chance of leading a happy and relatively normal life. And I'm hoping that those feelings are now changing. And people see someone with a disability is no different than anybody else. We all have the same feelings, wants, and desires as everybody. And just the chance to achieve it is what we're looking for.
Thank you so much for that. And also thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and also sharing your story and able to share some words of wisdom in terms of when it comes to disability, and actually sharing that just because you have a disability, that doesn't mean that your life is over. And also, and your story it really speaks about a lot about resilience and being able to actually overcome adversity and being able to say that even though I have been dealt with these cards, I choose to actually to react differently to the situation, to react positively. So again, thanks so much. I really appreciate you and your time, and thank you so much for sharing your story again.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate that. It's nice to talk to you.
Thank you so much. And also have a nice day.
You as well.
Okay, bye. Bye. Bye.